I was out meeting my neighbor friend here, David, for lunch, about a week ago, and I had to run over to the ATM right where we were eating at, get out a couple bucks. So I noticed a lady in front of me, woman, not a kid, not a young, millennial, but a, 30-plus-year-old, 35, something or another, whatever, older woman that was doing the same thing I was, pulling some money out of the ATM, and she got her money, walked away, the receipt printed out. And my thoughts were, well, I'll just grab it and throw it away. I'm not going to print a receipt out for myself. I don't need to. So curiosity, of course, got the best of me, and she didn't take it. You left it there. I wonder if there's a balance. Is there a balance on her receipt? So I get my money out, pull her receipt out essentially, flip it over, $1,000 in her checking account. And I thought, what was that old thing we've been talking about lately? The numbers, like most people don't even have $500. Couldn't spend $1,000. Something like that. So sure enough, I ended up sending this link to do a video on from Wolf Richter's site, and it's been days, honestly, since I did that, and just other things I thought were more important to do videos on. That's why I just did those instead. But today I only sent myself 2 videos to do. So I was like, I got the perfect third one, the one that's been waiting on me down there to talk about this issue we have here in America. Again, this is Wolf Street, but my title is 46% of adults can't cover an emergency expense of $400. However, Wolf Richter's title is technically, so who are the debt slaves in this rich nation? The American economy has split in two. How averages of wealth and debt paper over the profound risks. We constantly hear the factoids about American households that paint a picture of immense wealth, the American dream, and therefore a lack of risk for consumer lenders during the next downturn. We hear this, the thing that happened in 2008 and 2009 won't happen again. For example, total net worth, which, by the way, let me stop there. Supermarket rally. Dow Jones hit 21,000. Oh my gosh. Rallied on the French elections. But hold on. I thought if Le Pen had any chance of winning, that was bad news for the markets. Just like Brexit was bad news for the markets. And just like Donald Trump was bad news for the markets. But then they turned around and rallied. And her and Macron, her opponent, are going on to the next round. And they're saying he just eked out a win, a little bit more than her, which means automatically when the second round of voting, which is the one that matters the most now, he's pretty much going to win, is what they're saying. I think we learned a lesson here recently, though. Don't trust the polls, don't trust the media, and don't count your chickens before they hatch. Let's wait and see who actually wins this. Now, they're trying to paint a picture of this guy, Macron, as another, Le Pen, but a male version. No, wait a minute. I know who he is and who he's been attached to. He is a globalist stooge, 100%. So I'm hoping that enough people in France have awakened, and when it's time to go out and vote, I think it's May 7th, I think is the next one, they handle business and Le Pen gets a massive victory. Having said that, back to the article. For example, total net worth, assets minus debt, of U.S. households and non-profit organization, for some reason they're lumped together, he says, rose to an astronomical $92.8 trillion at the end of 2016, according to the Federal Reserve. This is up by nearly 70% in early 2009 when the Fed started its QE and zero interest rate programs. So that sounds interesting. Total net worth, which is, again, assets minus people's debt of U.S. households, which for some reason they lumped in nonprofit organizations too. Is it possible they lump those in? I mean, think about that. If you want a stat, I want to know what the U.S. household such and such is. Any financial number. I want this number, that number, anything financial. If I brought you back a chart and said, here it is, sir, and it also includes nonprofit organizations, would you say, idiot, what are you doing? I want households, people, not any kind of corporation or nonprofit. I want people. I just want households. That's what I asked for. No, I'm going to lump this in. Is it possible that the nonprofits did so well that they had to include them to make this number look good? Hey, you know they like cooking the books and fudging the numbers. Anyways, inflating household wealth was one of the big priorities of the Fed during the financial crisis. It would crank up the economy. In an editorial in 2010, Fed President Chair Ben Bernanke, not president, but Fed governor, Ben, or I like to call it better, the Ben Bernanke himself, called this the wealth effect. So with this colossal wealth of U.S. households, that what could go wrong during the next downturn? And may I add something? You know how the rich got richer and the poor got poorer? Is it possible that a lot of this wealth, even though they're combining nonprofits for some reason, is most of the rich getting richer? Very possible. So he says, here's what could go wrong. About half of Americans do not have enough savings to pay for even a minor emergency expense. So like I said, this lady in front of me, this is firsthand experience for old Jay Snip. Hey, I don't have to ask somebody or tell you a friend, friend told me. Says, nope, lady right in front of me, $1,000 in her account. That's all she's got in there. And I'm sure a bunch of you are like, oh, Jay Snip, you could just ask me. That's me too. That's because that's a lot of Americans. It's a lot of Americans. The Federal Reserve found that 46% of adults could not cover an emergency expense of $400, such as a broken windshield. Now, let's think about that. 46%, we're going to just say half, right? Half of adults could not cover any expense of $400 or more. How then did we have this huge wealth effect, or this big $90 trillion number? Or is it bogus garbage from the government, from the Fed? Because if that number skyrocketed, and they said it did, then that would mean a measly $400 bill. You can't pay that. We were all recipients of the wealth effect. What the? They would either have to borrow the money or try to sell the couch or something. So nearly half of the adults in the U.S. live from paycheck to paycheck. About 15% of American households have either zero or negative net wealth, according to the New York Fed. Negative net wealth means they have more debt than assets. So 15%. That's a pretty crappy number for a country. 15% have negative wealth. You have more debt than you do anything else. Assets, anything. Again, $90 trillion, in new wealth, or not new, but it's up to $90 trillion now. Would they say it was up? Was it 70%? Yeah. For example, total net wealth, assets minus debt of U.S. households and nonprofit organizations, they lumped together, rose to an astronomical $92.8 trillion at the end of 2016, according to the Federal Reserve. This is up by nearly 70% in early 2009. Whoa. But apparently it didn't trickle down to us. But they're saying it did. That reads that it absolutely did. But then the next paragraph says, no, it doesn't, because people can't even afford a $400, emergency anything. And nearly 47 million Americans, or nearly 15% of the population, live below the poverty line, according to the Census Bureau. So who benefited from the wealth effect? Those who had the most assets at the very tippy top. Warren Buffett. At the other end of the spectrum, in 2016, only 52% of households owned stocks directly or indirectly. That means 52% of households don't have a 401k, don't have any kind of real retirement plan. The phenomenal stock market boom somehow left 48%, usually those below the poverty line, those who cannot cover emergency expenses, those with zero or negative net worth, etc., in the dust. Even those Americans with good incomes have loaded up with debt to try to live the American dream. In total, it has led to this situation. Student loan balances have skyrocketed by 160%. 1.6 times, 1.5 times from just 10 years ago. Auto loan balances have shot up 42% over the same past 10 years to now a record 1.1 trillion. Credit card debt and other revolving debt. One bit of good news, he says, to the great desperation of economists who want consumers to borrow more to spend more, has inched up only 7% over the past 10 years. And of course, didn't that number say finally hit $1 trillion now of debt for credit card debt? And households owe nearly $10 trillion in mortgage debt. So think about that number. 10 trillion households, not 10 trillion households, but households hold 10 trillion in mortgage debt. And the Federal Reserve bought nearly $2 trillion, 1.8 something trillion of mortgage-backed securities. So again, roughly 2 trillion, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Are you telling me the Federal Reserve bought 20% of all the mortgages out there? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. That's why their balance sheet is actually $4.5 trillion, but they say only about 2 trillion of that is strictly mortgage-backed securities and whatnot. Wow. But here's the thing about those mortgages. About 41% of the owner-occupied homes were free and clear without mortgage, according to the Census Bureau study in late 2016. So the mortgage debt of $10 trillion is actually borne by only 59% of the homeowners, and many of them have paid down their mortgages to a large extent. So a much smaller percentage of Americans carry the lion's share of that $10 trillion in mortgage debt. That's where the risks are. The same with student loans and auto loans. Those with the least amount of savings and the smallest net worth are those with negative net worth, or those with negative net worth owe a big chunk of this debt. Sure, when automakers offer 0% financing on an $80,000 vehicle, a wealthy person with a credit score of over 800 may be tempted to finance it. It's free money, 0%. Those loans are good as gold. But at the low end of the spectrum, there are subprime auto loans, which account for about 22% of total auto loans being originated. And these subprime auto loans that have been packaged into asset-backed securities and sold off to pension funds are now defaulting at rates beyond the highs of the last financial crisis, 08 and 09. Student loan defaults have reached catastrophic levels. On the surface, the number of people in default on their federal student loans surged 17% in 2016 to 4.2 million of the 42.4 million Americans with student loans. And that's defaulting. The other ones they haven't considered in default yet, but they still haven't paid it off. And it's really, really, really slow, as in I'm making the bare minimum payment and it's not doing anything. But the Department of Education conceded in January that it had massively overstated repayment rates. A subsequent analysis by the Wall Street Journal found that at more than 1,000 schools, at least 50% of the students defaulted or failed to pay down debt within 7 years. So, of all those numbers, Department of Education, we overstated the repayment rates. We made it look like it was much better than in reality. And when they say we made it look much better than reality, it was looking terrible then, which is why $1.4 trillion in student loan debt, a lot of that 22% defaulting, oh my gosh, that's horrible. No, actually, it's worse than that. Because I said, at least 50% of the students defaulted or failed to pay down the debt within 7 years. So if you can't pay down debt, that means you owe exactly what you owed before 7 years ago, or you even owe more because the interest is taking it up and you can't pay it off. Default rates for mortgages overall are still low, though they're inching up. According to S&P Experian First Mortgage Default Index, the default rate rose from 0.64% in May 2016 to 0.74% in February 2017, and they will remain low as long as home prices continue to rise, as they have been in the U.S. over the past years. In an environment of soaring home prices, homeowners, if they get in trouble, can usually sell the home for enough to pay off their mortgage. Hence, defaults are not necessary. Well, unless house prices go down. Then what does one do when you can't sell it and pay off any debt or pay off the mortgage or pay off whatever you intended on paying off? Because the prices of your house or price of your house have gone down. What do? 2008 and 2009 all over again. Just walk from it. Oh, you want the house? Come get it, bank. I'll live in here till you kick me out, and then you can come get the house. That's how that goes. Defaults soar after home prices have started to sink from the lofty peaks that in many cities have already shot way past the highs of the prior crazy house price bubble. At that point, the proceeds from the sale of a home may fall short, far short, of covering the mortgage. In consumer credit, the risks are concentrated where people have no savings, where credit scores are lower, and where incomes are tight. That's about half the households. The American economy has split in two, and they're the other half. For them, not much, if anything, has improved since the financial crisis. They've been left behind by the Fed's wealth effect, but these are very large numbers, and they owe a large portion of the consumer debt, and their finances are fragile. And when the next downturn causes a hiccup in their lives, credit will unravel from the bottom up, as it already has begun in auto subprime loans and student loans. But the glorious net worth figures and other aggregate numbers and averages do a great job of papering over the issue. Again, the guys like Warren Buffett and these huge multi big giant billionaires and little teeny tiny 1%, they've got so much wealth. Because when you average something, you have to take the average of everything. But if you were to take the average of this stuff that I just read and say, well, minus the 1% people, the numbers would be so awful, it would be shocking. It'd probably shock you to your core. So thanks to the heavy hitters over here, the numbers don't look too awfully bad, even though they suck. They would be god-awful if we didn't include the filthy rich on the end. Got to average it out. It's like the rest of us are 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30, and then over here, 700 by this little 1%. 700. Well, you take the 700, average that in with 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30. Oh, everybody's at 300. All right, not bad, not bad. Take the little guys, the little amount off, the heavy hitters, and then you get reality. Average is 10, 20, 30. Average is 20, and just whatever this bogus number I'm making up here is. Oh my God, it's terrible. That's what that means. Oh my God, it's terrible. Anyways, I'm done talking. Take care.